This week on Arizona Illustrated, we recognize the dedication and service of Southern Arizonans in our armed forces and remember those who paid the ultimate price so that we may remain free. Welcome to Arizona Illustrated. I'm Tom McNamara. Over the past decade, Arizona public media has documented the stories of Southern Arizonans who served in our armed forces in a series of programs called Tucson Remembers. We were honored that these veterans of World War II and the Korean War shared their memories with us. In the 10 years since we first recorded their stories, many of the storytellers have left us. And so we'd like to remember them through their memories this week. We begin with Hank Oyama. After retiring as a lieutenant colonel from the Air Force, Oyama began a distinguished career in Tucson schools. Known as the father of bilingual education, he taught at Pueblo High School and later retired from Pima Community College as vice president. TUSD named a school after him in his honor. Oyama Elementary School is not far from his boyhood home in West Tucson.
We would often sleep outside because it was cooler. We'd sleep on the springs of the bed because it'd be cooler. So that was life in the old Pueblo. Many of the places where we lived at didn't have floors, they just had dirt. And the toilets were outside, and the water faucets were outside. And I went to Davis Elementary, where I was punished for speaking Spanish, because that's what I grew up speaking. I got a bunch of papers and I walked about a half a block, and by that time I had sold them all, so I ran back, and I did that about 3-4 times. Anyone of Japanese extraction was sent to an internment camp. And so we left there in our last year at Safford Junior High School. In the early days of Poston, it was dusty, and our supper that they gave us there was chili beans and crackers, and it was kind of gravelly because of the dust. In this camp out in the middle of the desert, and it was located between Parker, Arizona, and the Colorado River. I had wanted to enlist because at camp we kept seeing movies and hearing songs that, of course, glorified the uniform, and service and so on. So we wanted to be in the service. So after a year and 4 months, my mother and I applied to go work in Kansas City. And I went to work for the Aluminum Company of America. While there, I was drafted. Then they said, we're going to send you to the Military Intelligence Service Language School at Fort Snelling, so you can brush up on your Japanese, and then you'll be an interpreter in the South Pacific. And I said, oh, wait a minute, you don't understand. I never learned Japanese. And they said, oh, you're just trying to get out of this assignment. So they sent me anyhow. And after 4 months at the Military Intelligence Service Language School at Fort Snelling, they gave me my diploma, and they said, you're right, you sure don't speak Japanese.
Following his stint in the service, Cressworth Lander spent his entire professional life working to improve the lives of Southern Arizonans. As a department head with the city of Tucson, he was responsible for community and economic development activities, as well as the development and management of public and affordable housing. He had a lifelong commitment to working within the system towards positive change, a system that didn't always treat everyone the same.
In 1912, the state legislature, in all their wisdom, decided to pass legislation that mandated that blacks and whites would not go to school together and that there would be segregated schools in Arizona. And I said that was odd because my mother was in Arizona when it was a territory, and she attended integrated schools in Tucson. I attended Dunbar in the 1st through the 9th grade. The teachers were the crowning glory of Dunbar, and they would teach us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you were wrong in school and you got a little beating, before you got home, they knew about it and you got another beating. Well, then I went to Tucson High, and this is a very odd deal, Now the same law that said that I had to go to a segregated 1st through the 9th grade, when I was ready to go to high school, that same law, for some reason, did not apply because it wasn't economically feasible to have a separate high school for the few number of black students that they had. I used to sell the Arizona Daily Star. I was downtown selling papers, and I heard on the radio that they had bombed Pearl Harbor. Looking at the deal, and if you volunteered for the Army, then you got 1 week leave of absence before you started. If you volunteered for the Marine Corps, you got 2 weeks leave of absence before you started. So I figured I needed the 2 weeks. So I went into the Marine Corps. Basically, they had a black Marine Corps at Montfort Point. Camp Lejeune was a large camp, and Montfort Point was one smaller camp. And that was the first time that blacks had been in the U.S. Marine Corps. You had that piece, you don't call it a rifle, it's a piece, and that is like your master. You don't let it get wet, you don't let it get dirty, you don't let it get anything, And so that's the Marine Corps way. Got out of boot camp and we went out to Onslow Beach, and we came in on one of those landing barges where you jump off the barge and you got a 100-pound load of ammunition on your shoulder, and you go into about 4 feet of water, and it's about up to your nose, and you're trying to keep your piece dry, and you walk up the deal to the, up the beach and get everything down. And I told him, you know what? I'm very good at clerical work. I know how to type and I know how to do things, and I'm going to go and take this job in the personnel section. The University of Arizona may have been there, but most people who were coming up during the Depression had no hope of ever attending the University of Arizona. I think the GI Bill was the greatest piece of social legislation that was ever passed, and it had just a tremendous effect on the dynamics of how we grew in the USA and how we prospered and how we turned this into the greatest country in the world.
Like what you see on Arizona Illustrated? Visit our webpage at azpm.org to watch and share videos from this episode. You'll also find stories from future programs, an easy way to submit your own story idea, an archive of past episodes of Arizona Illustrated, and you'll find everything you need to stay connected with public broadcasting in Southern Arizona. azpm.org. John Meek, a 17-year resident of Green Valley, wrote speeches for Presidents John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson. He was instrumental in helping to pass Medicare and the 1965 Voting Rights Act, wrote 3 books, and taught journalism at Pima Community College. Although a veteran of the Korean War, it was the actions of a former World War II ally that prompted Meek to enlist.
I joined on April 15, 1948 because of the Soviet threat. It looked like we were going to go to war with the Soviet Union. And as I say, Stalin was trying to take over, was already taking over Europe, the Eastern European countries. And this buddy and I decided we wanted to be where we wanted to be, so we joined the Navy. And because we thought there would be a draft and we'd end up in the Army, and that wasn't what we wanted to do. Just about the time I graduated and headed home on a bus or train, whatever it was, I heard that there was a war going on in Korea, and we were in it. I volunteered to be a corpsman, to go through the Marine training and go to Korea and be involved in the war. It's just like a nurse training, except it was a crash course. It was 2 months. But you know, the basic stuff of blood pressure, temperature, so forth and so on, and how to dress wounds, and how to put on a tourniquet and all those things. I was issued a carbine, and I chosen to trade that in for a Colt 45. It was a lot easier to have a 45 on your hip, and because the corpsman's bag was quite large. We had, I think, 2 of those little mini bottles of brandy that we could give, and every Marine knew we had that brandy. I never drank the brandy. I mean, I wasn't into drinking really. I haven't been reared a Baptist, and I never gave the brandy out to anyone. I was in my bunker messing around, and somebody said, "Meek, get some stretcher bearers. The patrol has run into trouble. They're wounded down there, and you got to go down and help them out." So I grabbed my bag and my weapon, and we went running down that hill like we were running the Boston Marathon. And what had happened was that there were rocks, and a Marine had stepped on a landmine and blew his leg off about around the knee. And one of my corpsman friends, who had been in training with me at Pendleton, went to do his job to treat him, and he stepped on a mine and blew his leg off. So I had 2 very, very severely injured people with legs blown off to deal with first, one of them being, a friend. North Koreans were throwing in, mortars and small arm fire and so forth. Fortunately, none of us were wounded at all through all of that, and got the guys up to the top of the hill, and then they back on the back side of the hill so a chopper could come up and pick them up and take them down to the hospital. And the time that I was there, I never lost a Marine who was not shot through there or through the heart. Otherwise, I saved them, or we saved them, I saved them, whatever, together.
Vietnam was the first war that the United States used helicopters extensively in combat. Local filmmaker Jason Stone flew helicopter rescue missions in Vietnam and had some harrowing firsthand experiences with the Army's 120th Helicopter Gunship Unit, the Razorbacks. Well, Stone produced a documentary tribute entitled The Shadows of Men, profiling the men, mission, and memories of the Razorbacks.
And the kind of missions we flew, 95% of them were hot missions. Somebody on the ground was in pretty big trouble. Well, they wouldn't have called us to start with. So when we get there, all the bad guys on the ground, they don't want to see us coming. They don't like us. They know who we are, and they're trying to kill us, and we're trying to kill them before they can kill us.
My job in Vietnam was air rescue, to try to recover pilots that had been crashed or shot down. And on one particular mission, when we got to the scene, there was 3 survivors, and there was only room for the medic, and so they left me and another guy on the ground. We're starting to get surrounded by this local VC village, and all of a sudden over the treetop came these 2 Army gunships, and they just flew right at them, and they covered us until my outfit could come back in and pick us up. On the way back, I asked the pilot who that other crew was, and he said, well, that he had called the Razorbacks to come in and cover us. So that was how I got to know the Razorbacks.
When we got brand new aircraft, we needed new call signs from what we had before. Since no other armed helicopter platoon had that name, and it was a great looking patch, we picked the Razorbacks to be our call sign.
One of the individuals I was shot down with, Bill Stribling, he had been a grunt before he got into the Razorbacks.
Having lived a tour hot and nasty and wearing the same clothes for weeks at the time, when I'd see these door gunners come in to pick us up, I noticed they wore clean fatigues and were shaven and all that, and that looked pretty good. So I thought I wanted to try that. So when my tour was up, I extended for this particular helicopter company.
And one of his comments that's in the documentary was, when you're on the ground, you might get in skirmishes now and then every month or so or whatever, but in the Razorbacks, it was virtually on a daily basis.
The adrenaline high, I guess you would call it, of actually shooting at someone who's shooting at you. It's exhilarating, but very addictive, where you think, man, next time we get in, I can't, you go out on a mission and nothing happens, you're let down. You come back and you're almost depressed.
We wanted to be in combat. I mean, a lot of guys said we were crazy, and I didn't think we were crazy. That was the mission. I mean, and we loved doing it.
When I was in Vietnam, I became very interested in photography, and I started shooting a lot of black and white photography. So I thought I'd make a little short piece using those photographs, and I asked if they'd mind if I did some interviews. Once I got into the documentary, I really couldn't deal with my own issues, so I just put all that stuff to the side. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have made the documentary. And so I just refused to kind of go into that realm and just focus on the project that I had.
It got to be that was a unit you extended for, or you did a second tour with. A little saying up on the wall, we'd tap it as we go out the door. It said, "Razorbacks go where angels fear to tread." And I got to the point where I was believing that.
After the war, they kind of a few of them kept in touch, and then they started having reunions, and it kind of grew from that. And in the documentary that I did, I interviewed 22 members from that whole course of 8 years that the platoon existed. And it was a brotherhood.
I was always surrounded with good people when I was over there. Never had to worry about them. Never had to watch my back. I always had somebody to watch it. I'd watch theirs, they'd watch back. There was a lot of things that affected my life in a positive way. And one of them was the people that was in the Razorbacks that I got to work with.
I guess positive is one word, but profound might be a more better word for it, because war is such a profound experience. I can't really necessarily say that the Vietnam experience was, a lot of the guys came back with a positive things from it because a lot of them, most of them had issues to deal with PTSD and that type of thing, but the reunions helped quite a few of them. I really did want to make the documentary to honor this particular platoon and for the work they did. So often in combat and other aspects of our life, people who do extraordinary things go unnoticed, and in a way the story that they experienced over there is a story that they're experiencing today. It's a universal theme.
We weren't heroes, we had a job to do, and we did our job, and we helped save some people along the way, so be it. That's a byproduct.
I think overall, the Razorbacks embraced the documentary very well. I haven't really heard any bad things from it because it basically, I try to tell it, as I said, in their own voice. So I really didn't editorialize on the documentary at all. I wound up doing what I wanted to do, and that was to tell their story. And hopefully I did it in an honorable and a good manner.
On Memorial Day, in every city and town in our country, Americans honor and revere those who died in service of the United States of America. We look back at that day in 1988.
Today is the day we honor America's veterans, those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for peace and freedom. The memory of Vietnam remains firmly etched in our minds, but today we honor our heroes from conflicts going all the way back to the American Revolution.
The security of our nation depends on the youth of our nation. And as has been said, that in peacetime, sons and daughters bury their fathers and mothers. In time of war, fathers and mothers bury their sons and daughters.
This is a scene repeated in almost every community in America, tiny U.S. flags marking the graves of veterans. But Memorial Day is not simply a time when we honor our dead. It is also a time to celebrate life. Though the calendar may say otherwise, this is the day that Americans consider the unofficial start of summer. Today is the day we take aim on the great outdoors.
Boy.
Nope, no ringer.
She knows neither one.
Not enough fighters.
For the hale and hearty among us, a picnic at a neighborhood park just doesn't cut it. In order for it to be a real Memorial Day, a trip to Mount Lemmon is a must. It's a quick way to escape the heat, though today it was downright chilly on the mount.
Gonna be this temperature?
I didn't think it would be this cold, but we made the best of it. We're warm at heart and have a good time anyway.
I lived here 40 years. I'm still not used to cold weather.
What are you doing today? It's kind of chilly.
I got a jacket in the truck just in case.
Despite the disappointment of campers and day trippers, the chill on Mount Lemmon may have actually been a blessing in disguise. Because of a light rain and snowfall this season, the fire danger is as high today as it's been in some time.
We're looking at tinderbox right now because with the higher winds it'll spread a lot rapider. You know, it preheats, the fuel's up above it, and you just carry it. The wind will keep carrying it, and it causes problems with our man forcing with trying to control it.
Officials say they haven't had any problems on the mountain so far with campers, but they will keep their fingers crossed until the holiday is over, and then they will hope for rain, because the 4th of July, the next 3-day holiday, is only a month and a week away.
You have a nice day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for joining us here on Arizona Illustrated. Next week, an important milestone in the countdown to the launch of OSIRIS-REx. an ancient watering practice renewed. On the field with the Lax Cats. And Kenny Scharf transforms cars into art. I'm Tom McNamara. See you next week.